right, let's get started. So I would like to welcome everyone to the Recovery and Strengthening for Marching and Movement session, which is part of our 2021 MPA Virtual Education Series with presenter April DeJarlais, who's a longtime performer and educator in the local marching arts world in Minnesota here. So my name is Vlad Boz and I'm president, excuse me, of MPA. And that's all you need to know about that. With that said, I would like to thank our 2021 season sponsors for MPA. We have silver sponsors, marimbarental.com, Growth Music, the St. Cloud State University Department of Music, and Creative Costuming and Designs. And bronze sponsors, Shirtworks and Promotionals, Schmidt Music, the Minnesota State Mankato University Maverick Machine, and Custom Fundraising Solutions Twin Cities. So thank you to these awesome organizations for supporting MPA as season sponsors. And with that, I would like to turn it over to April, who will introduce herself further and carry on with the event. So thank you, April.
Hey, thank you, Vlad. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone being here, and I'm really excited to do this. Vlad, maybe you're on it right now, just in terms of the screen sharing capabilities. Just a reminder.
You should be able to share. I gave you the.
Oh, great. Yes. Okay, sweet. I'll do that in a minute. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Vlad. I'm April. Let's see, what did I actually want to say? I think I was most interested in introducing what I've marched and how long I've been marching. So some of you know, some of you I haven't met before. I spent a few years on snare drum in high school at Champlin Park, 2005 to 2008. And then after that, marched a few years of Minnesota brass indoor and outdoor between the years of 2008 and 2014. So I've had the weight down here, and I've also had some weight up here, and got to experience just kind of the differences in that and how my body reacted to it. So in the past year, I went through a yoga teacher training. So a lot of this will be inspired by yoga poses and yoga flows. And through that, I've just gotten to know a lot more about like the musculature and bone structure of the body, which for better, for worse, while I was in high school and getting introduced to the marching arts, right, it was just more about kind of hard work and getting stuff done and performing. And then so much more started to emerge, I think, in the marching arts in terms of body movement and dance, more dance influence. And it felt like there was a little bit of a gap, and luckily the marching activity seems like it's really catching up in terms of education and physical therapy. There's some folks on this call who have marched at a very high level. So at the end, during some discussion Q&A, I might rope some of you in to see what you've learned and any additions you might have. So that's what I kind of wanted to introduce with. I'll hop on a quick Google Slides presentation here, 10 minutes or less. And then we'll do some flow, we'll do some stretching and exercises for about 25 minutes. And then at the end, we'll have some time for questions and discussions. So should wrap up by about 4. Okay, great. So here's my loosely titled Google Slides presentation. Thanks to Minnesota Percussion Association for creating the opportunity to do this. So can I carry heavy things and still be healthy? Yes, and here's how. Okay, so I wanted to get in first a little bit to the different types of posture that can show up. So I'm going to start over here on the right. We see kind of forward head, maybe text neck, if you will. So kind of this hunched shoulders, head really leaning forward. When I was in high school and maybe mostly through my marching career, I had intense head forward posture. So I've also learned to tuck my chin back quite a bit. Oops. Okay, and this next one, moving to the left here, this was interesting to learn about. So it's called hyperlordosis. And the lordosis refers to that really deep curve in the lower or the lumbar spine, which then translates to some kind of hunched shoulders, kind of an extended upper back, and still kind of that head lean. So that's called lordosis or sway back. So this kind of like intense S curve. I'm thinking of an analogy that a lot of us use in marching arts, talking about the pelvis tilt. So thinking about your pelvis as a bowl of water. This might be the bowl is really tipped forward to creating like an intense curve there. So then we move to flat back. So here's where this pelvis kind of bowl of water is tilted back a lot, creating like a really flat lower back. So kind of eliminating that natural S curve, which to a degree can be helpful, right? Especially if we're trying to correct some of this intense curve, but knowing too that this can put stress on the spine. Let's see, kyphosis is just a kind of intensely hunched shoulders. So maybe it's not that the pelvic bowl of water is tipping forward or back, but just kind of that pulling forward of the shoulders and being hunched, kind of demonstrating that now if you can see. So that can be reversed by really pulling that collarbone up and back. And then we see this healthy S curve over on the left. So hips, ankles, mostly in line. Neck is maybe pulled back, so it's lining up with the shoulders. Pelvic bowl of water is pretty straight. And I really like thinking about this in terms of healthy posture versus like good posture or bad posture. I think sometimes thinking about it like that, like doing something wrong or bad, can make us more tense, which leads to more shoulder and back tension. So more just getting curious about our posture and saying, oh, what's going on here? What do I do naturally? And how can I maybe change it so as to reduce pain for myself and reduce the stress on my bones and joints rather than good or bad. Okay. Next, we'll get into some kind of muscle groupings we'll be working with today when we move. So this is the inner core diagram here. We've got so this is our 6-pack, 8-pack, I guess, if you have muscles up here, whatever. The rectus abdominis, so those kind of front muscles. And we will be working with the transverse abdominis today. And then a lot of the internal and external obliques. So kind of on the side of your core. And then it's like the transverse abdominis is kind of inside, like the underlayer of muscle that's underneath that awesome 6-pack, 8-pack that we all have. And we'll do an exercise when we get moving to help feel that transverse abdominis a little bit. Okay. A couple notes here. So we talked about kind of the deep core, this inner core unit, the transverse abdominal muscles, another muscle group that we'll talk about will play into that. This is the deep core. So this is like the spine's safety belt. And I'm thinking of the quad harnesses, carriers that have that safety belt across the back that always felt so secure and really helpful. We can have that internally the more that we work on these muscles, right? To help kind of support and stabilize from the inside. Because thinking back to those posture pictures, we can kind of think about how we compensate, right? Like when our body gets tired, we lean to one side or kind of, slump into our joints and bones. My yoga teacher calls this dumping. So I'm going to use that term a little bit when we kind of like collapse into our body. And that's that's when the muscles stop working, right? And where the joints and bones pick up the stress of our body's weight, which can over time result in pain and joint issues and arthritis and back pain and all that stuff that we don't want. So these inner core muscles really work with our glutes, our butt, and our hip flexors, including the psoas muscle, which we'll talk about, to stabilize that pelvic bowl. Okay, let's see, a couple more notes here. So we talked about the transverse abdominis, that kind of interior belt around our waist to protect our spine and really cushion that spine. Well, it's doing all this crazy, wild movement while we're marching around and doing all this dance movement and stuff. And we'll talk about this while we're moving today. So the spine staying stable. And that's really referring to like avoiding that collapse motion, or like allowing our spine to carry our weight. A lot of which happens, I'm going to turn sideways, right? When we have a weight in front of us, when we're carrying a drum and it's up here or down here, right? We'll typically lean back to compensate, or lean forward a little bit to let the weight hang off so our muscles can get a rest, which has that short-term relief, right? But then we have to think about the spine is then carrying that weight. And the spine is ultimately, I mean, it's not weak or strong, but it can deteriorate, right? Whereas if muscles are holding up, there will be that kind of short-term burn, wanting it to wrap up or wanting to take the drum off or something like that. But it's so much of like a long-term investment, I think, in our ability to carry and move with the equipment on. Because to move to this next point, when our interior core muscles are weak and aren't trained for load or weight bearing, every time we move, twist, bend, there's always the risk of strain or injury because the spine is lacking that interior cushion that can stabilize and support us. And this will feel really different than working on the external abdominal muscles, that 6-pack or 8-pack. My favorite story that illustrates this, I think, is with Minnesota Brass Indoor, the Black Widow show a few years back. A longtime color guard dance instructor in the Minnesota scene, Angie Haugie Jordan, came to teach some movement. And she had delivered a baby like 5 minutes prior. I don't know. I mean, obviously an exaggeration, but she had very recently delivered her second child and came in and did all this movement, and it was like spider movement, really intense stuff. And I think that just speaks so much to like whatever state our body is in, or like body type that we have. If we have these internal core muscles, it might look a million different ways externally, but we have that internal strength to be able to do really powerful things. And maybe we have the body type where that shows up as external muscles, and maybe sometimes it doesn't. So I really like that story and I just think about it. Okay, let's review our psoas. So our psoas and hip flexor, a really important, really interior muscle, right? That's connected to our legs, all the big muscles that we work with when we march. And then our back too. It's the only muscle that connects our lower and upper body. So just, I read that sentence, whatever, yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, that's just so important for marching. And it's amazing that it kind of feels so hidden, right? Because we're doing all this stuff with our lower body. We're carrying this weight that's compressing our spine down. And this again, kind of the interior safety belt is really working hard to connect to that upper and lower body. So you can really see, so like this front part the hip flexor part of the psoas, if that's tight, like picture that scrunching up, and then that's going to pull that lower lumbar spine right forward, resulting in that intense S curve of the spine. And if it's tight up here, it's going to pull it back, resulting in that really flat spine. So a nice, strong, relaxed psoas or hip flexor can really contribute to that kind of pelvic tilt and making sure that that lower spine stays healthy. Okay, what didn't I talk about? Yeah, that's kind of all just what I talked about. So one of the strongest muscles in your body, right, and the effect and influence on our internal structure, that internal core, can be really significant, really impactful, especially while we're marching around and moving so much. Okay, that's my TED Talk. And now I'm going to move, making sure my screen is set up. Oh, yay, welcome Sam Peck. Excellent. And hello to Patrick and Alex. Good to see you all. Great. So if you are ready to move, feel free to move. If you want your video screen on or off during this, whatever you like and are comfortable with. I have some blocks as a heads up that I'm going to use for props. If you want to grab something like this or like a blanket, a pillow, I realized a lot of this movement ended up on our like knees or kneecaps at some point. So if that bugs you, please make sure you have some cushion under your kneecaps. And then if you don't have blocks, feel free to grab books, textbooks, a pile of DVDs. I don't know, am I dating myself? I'm a millennial, so I have a bunch of flipping DVDs in my house, but whatever might be block shaped, if you want to have that with you. Okay. And you'll be able to see me the whole time. If anybody loses my audio at any point, just hop in and let me know if there are issues. Okay, great. If you've got the space, go ahead and we'll start on our backs. Okay, there we go, okay. And you can let your legs go long. So getting into that transverse abdominis muscle. So we're on our backs. And right now, even just start keying into your pelvic tilt. So you can slide your hands under your lower back and just kind of feel the space there. And what is it like when that lower back, when you tilt your pelvis to help that lower back touch the mat or the ground, right? So you can kind of see where you hit naturally. And then go ahead and take your hands, find your hip bones, or just kind of where the top of your pelvis would be, and go ahead and put your fingers kind of on the inside. And then go ahead and fill your belly up with air. Take a big inhale and exhale like, right? So kind of that push out of air. You might feel your core kind of brace. That kind of big, quick exhale. And that's your TVA, that's your transverse abdominis activating. On your own, do that a couple more times. And you can kind of feel as you do that, the lower part of my back, my lumbar spine starts to touch the mat, right? So that kind of bracing of the core, the interior core, helps us get that pelvic tilt and activate those interior muscles. Okay. Let's go ahead, let's play with, let's hug the left knee into the chest. And just do holding onto it with your hands. Maybe you can just let your right hand fall and hold on to your left knee with your left hand. Do some circles with your knee. Just kind of feeling how that affects your lower back on the ground. And go ahead and hug your knee into your chest again. And doing that same kind of bracing motion, maybe you do that exhale again, like to activate that core. Go ahead and lift up. Lift up your right toes, keeping that leg straight. Okay, we're activating those core muscles a little bit more here. Maybe keep your foot lifted, draw a couple of figure eights with your foot. Continuing to breathe into your belly. Okay. And then you can let that right foot go. And let's take a twist to start out with. So we're holding our left knee here. I'm going to grab a block and set it over on my right hand side, grabbing your left knee with your right hand. Let that knee fall over to the right, keeping your left shoulder on the mat. Starting out with a twist here. If you want a bit of a quad stretch, you can reach for your right foot with your left hand, kind of like letting those hands connect behind you, and that'll give you a little bit of a quad stretch. Or you can just leave that foot out long. Feel free to look over your left shoulder here if you'd like to get a little bit more of a spinal twist. And just take a few big inhales and exhales here, in and out of your belly. Here. And let's unwind. Go ahead and hug both knees into the chest here. Maybe rock side to side on your spine a little bit. And keep the right knee hugged in, and we'll let the left leg go long. So same thing here, activating that inner core now with our left leg. So feeling that interior brace. And then let's lifting up the left leg, right? Keeping it long, maybe drawing some shapes with your foot. Keeping your back in contact with the mat. Continuing to breathe in your belly. And we can set that foot down, and we'll take the twist over to the left side. The left hand on the right knee, falling over to your left, checking out that that right shoulder stays on the mat. And again, here you can connect those toes behind you with your right arm, or you can just keep that leg long. Grabbing your foot behind you will just can give a little bit of a quad stretch and some psoas stretch, hip flexor stretch into that bottom leg. Just taking a few breaths here again. Feeling into this twist. See if you can let one part of your body that might be holding on, see if you can help it let go. And let's unwind. Hugging the knees, both knees into the chest again. Okay, so from here, hands on our knees, Go ahead and let your arms straighten. And then wiggle your knees back and forth like you're kind of, I don't know, steering a car. Kind of like that. But just kind of wiggling your lower back and forth. That can also help shake out some tension. Okay, a couple more leg lifts to kind of warm us up. So from here, let's extend our legs up to the ceiling. Feeling that interior brace, again, activating that inner core. Go ahead and start to lower your legs down. Okay, keeping that back connected to the mat. Okay, floating almost down to the ground, and let's bring it back up. So maybe you go down to here, I don't know, what, a 45-degree angle, and that's it for you. If that's how far you go while being able to keep your back connected to the mat, that's great. That's what we're looking for, and that's the kind of like strong practice makes perfect vibe. Because if you're going down to the ground, but you feel your back arching a lot, that means your spine is starting to take on a lot of stress. So really activate those interior core muscles. And let's do 5 up and downs, however far you want to go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and wherever you are, go ahead and hold it. Holding it for 3, 2, 1, and knees into the chest. Fabulous warm up. Okay. Knees into the chest, let's rock side to side a little bit. And then you can start to rock forward and back if that feels good. If not, you can just kind of sit up. Okay, and let's go ahead and meet in tabletop position. Okay, so knees under hips, wrists pretty much under your shoulders. And here's a fun place also to check into pelvic tilt. So if you're forward, you might look like that a little bit. And then if you're trying way too hard for a straight back, you might start to like hunch a tiny bit. So check that out. If you have a mirror, awesome, but you can also just kind of feel it out as to how to help that back be straight. Okay, from here, let's go ahead and extend our left foot back. Yes, okay. And let's lift it up so that back and that back leg and our backs are just making one long straight line. And let's bring that knee toward our nose. Okay. So extending, knee toward your nose, extending. If you want to power this up a little bit, that right foot, you can charge up. So we're in like a standing plank. Okay. If you're still in your kneecaps, keep going with those knee to your nose. Otherwise, let's do a few in plank position here. So extending, knee to your nose, extending, knee to your nose, extension. Wherever you are, let's drop that right knee. Okay, so that left foot is still extended. And let's bring the left foot, get my blocks out of the way, left foot over, back behind the right foot. So I'm gonna flip so you can see me a little bit. So that left foot will come behind. And then go ahead and look at that foot over your right shoulder. So you're getting a really nice long left side body stretch here. Look again. Okay. So our right kneecap is still on the ground. And from here, we're just gonna tick-tock that over, keeping the left leg extended, and we'll meet in what's called gate pose. So if you got mixed up or turned around, right knee is on the ground, foot is just straight behind there, left leg is extended. Your foot can kind of be on its ankle or on the sole of your foot. Here's if you don't have padding under your right knee, feel free to grab something now and get something under there if you need more cushion. So while we're here, check into your like balance compensation at all. A lot of the times we'll kind of dump into that right hip and kind of lean over, or we might be counteracting already by leaning to the right a little bit. So check out that kind of that right side body is nice and straight. Okay, so left leg is extended. Let's let the left hand really lightly kind of fall down that left leg, pretty much no weight in there at all. And let that right arm come up and over. So a nice long right side body stretch here. And then we're gonna come up really slowly. I don't know, you can, well, yeah, keep your arms up and over. Letting the arms extend side to side. And really slowly, lightly dropping that right hand down. So starting to activate the left side body. You can let that right hand fall and the left arm comes up and over. So now real long line from your left feet, your left foot to the tips of your left fingers. You can play with whatever feels good with your neck here. If looking down feels better, maybe looking up. Just kind of hang out in the stretch for a second. Okay, really slowly, we're gonna do that same motion reversed. So lightly lifting up off the right hand, using our side body to come up, and then dropping back over to the left. Okay. And on your own, just a few times, really slowly repeating that motion. So tick-tocking now over to the right, letting that right hand land really softly, not really putting too much weight on the mat at all, and reversing that. Coming on over to the left. And the strength here gets built up in the slow, controlled movements, right? Because if we just launch ourselves off from that right hand, then it's just that launching motion doing the work rather than our obliques. So a couple more on your own. Okay. And we'll meet back up here in gate pose. Go ahead, I'm gonna turn 90 degrees. Go ahead and sit back on that right leg, keeping that left leg extended. And we're gonna sneak our hands forward. Okay, here's where some blocks can come in handy, or a book or something if you don't wanna go down so far. You can kind of prop yourself up on a block like that. And go ahead and play around here for a second, so you can go all the way down to the ground if that feels good for your back. You can kind of sneak around to the left, kind of putting your hands toward your left toes to get kind of like an inseam stretch on your leg. A little bit of a choose your own adventure. And then let's all meet in a child's pose. So child's pose might be knees apart. like this. And then sneaking those hips back and arms forward, or knees can be together, and then letting your body kind of curl over your knees and your arms go back. And this can be a really restful, rejuvenating position. You can let your forehead drop to the ground. My nose kind of smushes when I do that, but it feels kind of worth it. So whatever version of child's pose you landed in, take another couple breaths here, filling the belly up with air. Inhaling and exhaling a few times. Okay. Replanting your hands, pushing back up. And we'll come back to tabletop for the other side here. Alrighty. Sometimes I mix up my left and right, so I kind of have to think. Extending the right leg at it. Okay. So that left knee is planted, right leg is extended, lifting up that right leg. So it's parallel to the floor. Maybe you stay on your left knee here as you bring that right knee to your nose. Maybe you charge up that left foot so you're in plank. And right knee to your nose a few times. Maybe 3 more wherever you're at. 3, 2, and 1. Dropping that left knee if you had it lifted. Letting the right foot come cross over and back behind the left foot. And then looking over your left shoulder for that long right side body stretch. Okay. And unwinding. Rotating so that left knee is on the ground now, and we're in gate pose with our right leg extended. So left knee, left foot is behind the left knee, right leg out to the side. Checking your pelvic tilt here. I was just catching myself. I had a bit of a arch going on, so I went ahead and just kind of tucked that a little bit. So let's let that right hand fall really lightly. Again, not really putting any weight there. Falling down our right leg as that left arm comes up and over. Again, really slowly, really controlled. Tilting over to the other side. Maybe you just hover here for a second before those left fingertips even touch the ground. Feeling that right side activate. Letting those left fingers touch down lightly. Letting the right arm come up and over. I forget if we did this on the other side, but you can also let those feet float, your right foot float. Or you can keep it touched down too. Okay, couple slow back and forths on your own here. Letting the left side extend, letting your body tilt on over. Again, keeping the work in those core muscles rather than pushing off or launching off with your hands. All in these slow, controlled movements. Okay. And let's meet back in gate pose, and we'll push back on this side. And I'll turn so you can kind of see, letting your hips fall back. That right leg is extended. Maybe reaching the arms just forward, or you can turn towards your right toes with your hands too. Or again, kind of like an inseam stretch. Okay. Right. Let's meet back on our shins, facing the front of your mat. Yeah. Grab a few shoulder rolls. That feels kind of nice. Kind of big, up and down with your shoulders. It's kind of resetting that upper back. And we'll lift up, so we're on our shins. I'm gonna actually flip. You don't have to do that, just a screen thing. Okay, so we're on our shins. Let's go ahead and plant our left foot just in front of us. So you might see on my screen, there's kind of like a square shape between my legs right now. Maybe you stay there. Maybe start to sneak that left foot forward. Okay, so we're getting into kind of a lunge here. And you'll start to feel in that right front hip, your hip flexor, psoas muscle, starting to stretch. Okay, so you can either have your hands kind of lightly on your knee or just floating down. If you want to feel a little bit more, you can kind of lift your hands up in this cactus shape and get a tiny bit of a back bend going, right? Which really extends this whole front line of your body up and out. And go ahead and plant your hands on either side of that left foot, straightening that left leg, can lift the left toes up. So now we're in this kind of long back line hamstring stretch. Checking out your back shape here. So this is where I like to have blocks so that I can keep my back straight. Because if my hands go down to the ground, then I start to hunch a little bit. So whatever helps you kind of keep your back nice and straight and engaged. And then as you fold over that extended leg. And the knee here, it can be slightly bent. It doesn't have to be like locked back. That might hurt a little bit. So a nice kind of gentle bend is totally okay. Let's rebend that left leg, coming into that right side hip flexor stretch. And from here, let's see. Let's put both hands on the inside of that left leg and toe heel that left foot out to the edge of your mat. So it's just kind of a wider stance. And again, with kind of a straight engaged back, come down a little lower. So again, if you're working with books or blocks, maybe you set those up to help you. And this will really get into that left hip. Give you a second to set that up. Can also play with this right foot, allowing that to float up to the ceiling. This is as far as I can go in that respect, because this is also even more of an intense front body stretch. So this is lizard pose. Just gonna hold this for a few moments. That foot can be down or it can be lifted up. And maybe you can reach back toward that foot too. Wherever you're at, let's release that. Can toe heel that left foot back into the center of the mat. We're gonna tuck the back toes, charge up that back knee, and step in a couple feet. So using your blocks or maybe your hand is just on your left shin. That's kind of a hard balance pose. But here's where blocks are helpful. So our feet are both pointing toward the front of the mat. Back is flat. And our pyramid pose here. Holding this as you lean over your front leg. And let's step back, letting that back knee touch down. And we're back in our lunge, maybe doing a bit of a back bend. And we'll flow that for a few transitions here. So tucking the back toes, lifting up, stepping up toward pyramid pose, bending over the front leg, stepping back gently into the lunge. Tucking back feet, stepping up, bowing over that front straightened leg, stepping back, landing back into that lunge. Okay, great. The transition pose between these two sides, I wanted to come into what's called a yogi squat. So there might not be a graceful transition here, but okay, basically your feet are shoulder width apart. You can sit on a book or a block here if that helps your back be straight, right? Sometimes in this pose we can kind of hunch over. Go ahead and do what you need to do to help your back be straight. If that's sitting up on a lot of books, then you're just whatever you need to do to get your knees kind of spaced apart and your back straight. We can kind of reset here and open those hips up a little bit. So I'll face the camera. Palms can be together. You can use your elbows to help push your knees apart. And maybe you kind of push to one side or the other. Playing with the hips here, resetting the hips. And let's stitch the blocks. Plant the hands between your feet and lift up into a quick forward fold, letting your head totally drop. Slowly roll up. I'll meet you in standing. Oh, my head got cut off the screen. Okay, grab a quick shake before we do that last side. Meet you on your shins. Okay, let's see. So, right foot forward. Right foot knee bent. Again, this 90-degree space. Starting to move that right foot forward. Slowly easing into this lunge now on stretching out the left side. So maybe just continuing to rest those palms lightly on that right knee. Maybe lifting your arms up in that cactus shape, getting a small back bend. You can also interlace your fingers behind your back to kind of pull your shoulders back a little bit too. Okay, let's plant the hand on either side of your foot and straighten that front leg, letting the right toes rise up in that half split shape. I grab my blocks again. Okay, bowing over that front leg. And let's move forward back into that lunge shape. Letting the front left line of the body stretch out. And back into the half splits. Letting that front leg extend straight with the toes up toward the ceiling. Okay, coming back into the lunge, toe heeling that right foot out to the edge of the mat for lizard pose here on the other side. So if you've got blocks or books, whatever, those will be on the inside of your right foot. Maybe you just play with coming down onto whatever you've got in front of you. My hips are pretty tight, so I can't do that without hunching. Or you can stay up and allow that back left foot to float up toward the ceiling, again, for a pretty intense left hip flexor stretch. You can also twist back around, reaching your left fingers toward your left foot. Wherever you're at, taking a few belly breaths. When we're in this kind of active stretching, we tend to really tense up our belly and just breathe from the top of our chest. And we really want that core to be engaged and those muscles to be working with our breathing. Okay, letting it go wherever you're at. Toe heeling that right foot back to the center of your mat. Planting your hands or blocks on either side of your foot, tucking your back feet, activating that back knee, stepping in a couple feet into our pyramid pose on this side. So again, feet are kind of in their separate ski tracks, both feet pointing forward. Whatever you need to do to help keep your back flat here as you bow over that right leg. Again, a little bit of a knee bend is really helpful. A little bit of a knee or leg shake is also perfectly fine. Okay, repeating that same flow on the other side. So stepping that back foot back, dropping the knee, unfolding the foot, coming back for a tiny back bend for that hip flexor lunge. Replanting the hands, recharging the foot, stepping up into pyramid pose. A little bit of a forward fold. And last time, stepping the foot back, dropping the knee. And one more lunge with a back bend. All right. And meet you in a quick yogi squat. If that's no blocks, that lets you kind of sink into the hips a little more. Again, feet planted, toes out, palms together with your elbows kind of helping your knees stay apart. Or if it just feels more relaxed to sit on something, you can also do that. Taking a few moments to maybe push from side to side, stretching out those outer hips. All right, and ditching the blocks. Meet you just sitting on our butts. And let's end with a little bit of a boat pose recline here. So I guess you can't really see my feet contrast, but knees will be bent, back sitting up nice and tall. Maybe this is already a little bit of a core activation. Palms can be up toward the ceiling, out right in front of you. And start to recline. Recline back while keeping those core muscles engaged, checking out that you're not rounding through your upper back. Toes will start to lift off the floor and starting to extend slowly your body out straight as you lay down on the mat here. Okay. Let's do a last knees into the chest. Again, maybe a rock side to side. Maybe you put your hands on your kneecaps and letting your knees fall open. You can just kind of do windshield wiper, figure 8 motions with your knees. Just letting your legs kind of flop around a little bit, shake out. Yeah, you can let your knees kind of plant on the ground too, and even do like a windshield wiper motion with your knees. That can feel really good. And let's reset our pelvis here on the ground, letting our legs go long. So we're just lying here. You can let your hands fall out to the side. And I'll be quiet for about just 30 seconds here. Just take a few breaths on your own, kind of tuning into what feels different in your body or whatever you noticed while we were doing those movements. Start to wiggle your legs and arms a little bit. And when you're ready, you can hug your knees into your chest again. I'm kind of feeling the rocking up to sitting, but if you want, you can also just move up to a seated position, legs crossed. And that's our movement. Feel free to take whatever kind of loosen up movement you want. I'll readjust my computer screen. Oh my gosh, we're going long. We're at 4:04. Okay. I'll respect people's time. If people need to boogie, please feel free to leave. Otherwise, I'd love to stick around for 10 minutes and do any sort of Q&A or add in any folks with marching experience here who wanted to reflect on how that was or what they learned or how their development of bodies and backs and spines has developed over the years. So please hop in, but please feel free to leave if you have to go.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So earlier on, when we were in the wonderful Google Slides presentation, we talked about, or you talked about the like connections in the psoas to our back muscles, and how, you know, if your psoas is tight, it pulls down your back and it essentially like shrinks your posture and maybe forces some arching. Do you know if that's something that goes like both ways, meaning like it can start with either or, like say someone sits in a chair for a long period of time and their back gets very tight, would that then have the same kind of flow effect of pulling the psoas in and making your hips tight and vice versa? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And yes, that does happen.
Okay.
There's more in the like sources. As I was reading, there was a lot of that on sitting and just how like being in that 90-degree angle like pulls and shrinks. Since we were talking about movement, I was like, should I include that? But I didn't. But yeah.
Okay.
I think like any static position, right, will contribute to those muscles not atrophying. I think that's kind of an intense word, but just there won't be they don't get stretched. They don't get into different shapes as often.
Sure.
And I think that's one thing about marching too. Whenever I'm like stretching, or the thing I craved a lot while marching was just like my body being in different shapes for a longer period of time, because we're working really hard, but our legs are kind of in this box of movement a lot of the time. And there's just, I mean, it's really powerful, really strong motions, but it's also a repetitive motion. So I feel like the complementary motion or elongation of muscles is starting to get noticed more and more as being helpful.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. If for those of you who have used the Randall May carriers with the ABS back supports, do you find those to be useful, or how does that change the way, or the Pearl ones with the back strap that you mentioned, April? How does that change the way you approach movement, or do you find those help or hurt, or how do you feel about them?
Zach, do I see you hopping in here?
I mean, I
Okay.
can. I have like I've used every single carrier available like for years on years, but I mean, I don't want to be the only one who speaks, of course, but um, personally, I don't know. I found that the Randall May ones, while they do help your lower back, they put a lot of tension in my shoulders. They like take the weight out of my back and just kind of push it more toward my delts and my trapezius, and especially someone who like particularly had their drum on the higher side, that always led to me having a lot of shoulder problems, especially my right arm as a snare drummer, especially when I was marching like cadets. It just really was like there were camps I had to like it was not good. Something you would definitely see a trainer for now. Um, the Pearl ones were interesting with the belts we used at EP back in the day. I'd say like they're not very complimentary to taking your drum off, which is done a lot now in WGI, but they certainly help with keeping your back feeling good and straight. And then the Dynasty ones, which are kind of withering, you know, not too many groups using Dynasty carriers these days. They're like really bulky and heavy, and you have experience with Dynasty too, April, but I always kind of liked them as a member. They were just like very sturdy, and there wasn't a lot to them. And after like a day or two, you just kind of got used to it. And there wasn't anything like crazy pushing things in different directions. It was just very like the weight is on your body and it felt even. So I guess those are the big three. You know, Randall May, Pearl, and Dynasty.
Yeah, I'll add on to that quick too, because I have experience with pretty much all the same ones that Zach just mentioned. I did like the Pearl ones with the belt, but as Zach mentioned, it's not conducive to taking them on and putting them on really fast, and nor is the Randall May ones, or at RCR we call them the whale tails. And I mean, I've never marched with the Randall May ones myself, but I hear more complaints than like favorable comments regarding them. It feels unnatural for some, especially like thicker bodies like myself. It's really tight in the back and it's hard to adjust and make it feel comfortable every time. And it's also Randall May, so the material just isn't that nice in general. And then like Zach said, I really did prefer the Dynasty carriers actually. Like I can throw those things off the side of a building. It's going to be perfectly fine. Won't have to readjust it, whatever. Not that I would ever condone such behavior. But I mean, I'm just saying like the sturdiness and the reliability of the Dynasty carriers is really good. It was preferable to me. But the A-frames that Pearl has, the airframes are pretty nice too, I think.
I think I have left my Dynasty carrier on top of my car one time, so it can withstand quite a bit.
I'm sure it was totally fine. Yeah.
As far as I know.
Luckily, we don't have Randall May or other companies mentioned as sponsors, so we're all good to go. I do have a question though, April. What are a few top things that you would tell or remind instructors about when they're teaching movement, teaching marching, just in front of students who are moving in any way in the marching arts? What are some things that they need to keep in mind, and also a few things that students should keep in mind if their instructors don't tell them in the first place?
I think, I mean, like what we were covering on the slides in the beginning just seems so important in terms of like basic spinal anatomy and kind of knowing how your own body works, and kind of what your natural posture is and where you can strengthen or build up. So kind of doing some of these exercises on your own outside of rehearsal or something like that, and just seeing what you need to do. I think like just in terms of like diversity of bodies and body sizes, and people marching, right? I mean, we were just talking about carrier sizes and how a lot of times they were historically kind of created for one body type. So I think, I mean, harness adjustments aside, just kind of getting to know how your own natural posture is. And again, you might need to strengthen a different place than somebody else, and that might show up externally as different muscles, you know what I mean? So again, just kind of this attunement, keying into kind of your own body type and learning this kind of basic anatomy, and then what you can do to strengthen. And then I remember when an EP student said that she was going to the chiropractor like weekly, and there was nothing, you know, nothing like acutely wrong. She was just going for preventative care. And that had never occurred to me when I was 16, you know, like I was fine, and, you know, you could do it, and the drum weight is heavy, but it's okay. So this kind of like, if you can seek out any sort of preventative support via chiropractic care or physical therapy, something like that, like another kind of professional's eyes on your developing body, is something that, you know, we just weren't really tuned into, or we didn't feel like we needed, because we could handle it, right? Like we get to kind of challenge this culture of just working hard for hard work's sake, and we can kind of start to work smarter as well as working hard, because marching arts are hard work. So I would say, like, in terms of instructors, right, like you know, checking out some of this anatomy education, and maybe you spend half an hour on it one rehearsal, and maybe kids remember it, maybe they don't. And then as a member, just kind of tuning into where your own body can strengthen up. And two, because I think a lot of emphasis can get put on the extremity muscles, right? Or like our quads or our calves, right? Or, you know, whatever, biceps, back, which we need to be powerful marchers and movers. And this like kind of inner core can feel like a mystery because we can't see it and that it doesn't show up externally. But it's such a powerhouse that we need to control and be smooth to be able to combine the artistry with our movement.
Kind of going off of that, are there any things you can think of that when you see instructors doing or teaching a certain way, you're like, no, don't do that. No, just don't. That's really bad. Or things that just really stick out to you?
I think I walk the balance. I'm going to invite other folks to hop in here too. Like kind of, again, the blind hard work without like kind of individually responding to what an individual person seems like they need, or like, oh, this person will just eventually get it or fall in line, or because it worked for me, it should work for this other person. So kind of encouraging instructors to tailor instruction, right, or physical instruction to certain students if it looks like they're struggling with something specific, like, oh, how does this feel in your back? How does this feel, you know, do you feel this muscle activating? rather than just assuming the same instruction will apply for everybody.
If I could add on to that, because I totally agree with everything you're saying. One thing that I, as a marching arts educator, try to do is not only do those things, but I think my mind always goes to like, I want them to have a reason to kind of hype what they're doing and start to focus on, like, get excited about being healthy and understanding your body. So, one, I try to create an environment where, like, I tell, and this is true because it just is, but like the more relaxed you are, the better sounds we're going to make as percussionists, especially, in the marching percussion world. Like we can't, I've seen so many lines over the years that they play super well standing still, and then you get them on the move and the sound just isn't the same at all. And it just comes from that tension that creeps in. And so getting them to understand like the big picture, I shouldn't say getting to understand, that sounds a little forceful, like guiding them towards a place where they are excited to march well because it's going to help them play a lick better or sound better or, things like that. I think that kind of spreads, it spreads infectiously, as much as like playing licks on pads in a hallway between class and things like that. And another big one for me is when I was a kid, there was not a lot of encouragement to like get stronger outside of rehearsal. And I think especially at the high school level, you're catching a lot of these students at like a crossroads of them learning about their bodies, and learning how to get stronger and being at an age where they can start to do those kinds of things. And I had this like stigma of people who went to the gym when I was like 14 and 15. And I think most of us can probably think of like, a term like meathead or something, like a jock, just something negative that isn't conducive to want to go join that. Maybe you're nervous or afraid, or you just don't want to do that. So I think another thing I focus on is like, what can I do that's simple, that's at home, maybe in the privacy of my own room? Just things that like, again, getting them excited about getting stronger so that it helps us in the long run be better musicians. Those are the kind of two like big things. Just kind of making sure that we keep the big picture in mind and that we're doing this so it can help us do this, not just because, I'm yelling at you to march well on day one.
Thanks, Zach. That's awesome. Anybody else have any questions or any feedback about any of the movement?
I've got a question. So as someone who's about to start like auditioning for drum corps and hopefully make one and then go into training for that, what are some things that I can do to prepare? Like we went through all these movements, right? But what can I do to prepare for like actually marching on the field?
Awesome question. Good luck as you go through the audition process. That's awesome. I would say a lot of a combination of what Zach was just talking about in terms of strengthening, whether that looks like going to the gym, running, swimming, weightlifting, any sort of combination of those, plus, whether it's the movements we just practiced or yoga or stretching routines, any sort of kind of complementary movements to allow your body to stretch and recover. I know maybe Connor, Zach, Sam, y'all can speak to this a little bit more currently, but corps are employing like physical therapists on tour so much because injuries are just so wildly common from this repetitive, intense movement. So again, really anything you can do to strengthen and stretch, right? And not just hard work and then stopping the hard work and sitting down. That'll really contribute to a lot of the muscles like seizing up, leading to injury. So I think whatever works for you in terms of like calisthenics, weightlifting, plus recovery. Zach, Connor, whomever, pop on if you have any.
Yeah, I'd say like advice that I received and I would also give is get your body used to stretching like multiple times every day. Because if you go into drum corps with your muscles already loose, it's going to make the first couple weeks a lot easier for you in addition to strengthening. So definitely emphasis on stretching because most drum corps will start with like an hour of stretching every single day. So if your body's used to that, it's going to be a lot easier.
A lot of what we just did, Alex, in terms of the movement was some pretty common like yoga poses or flows, which I imagine are incorporated now in those stretch blocks. So I would hope that would kind of directly translate to something you'd be able to practice. Yeah.
Alex and Pat, you guys have heard me talk a lot about the importance of this stuff already. So I'll just add two other concepts we haven't really chatted about a whole lot. One very underrated thing is your diet. Pay attention to the things that you're eating as you're training, so that way you're actually building your body's strength up and not putting a bunch of gunk in there. I mean, you guys are younger, so you can handle a couple sodas here and there for sure. I'm not saying you have to be super strict, but just something to consider going forward. And then on top of all of this, consistency is key. You know, don't train just like once a week. Make sure you're training multiple times. You're listening to your body so you're not hurting yourself. You're training consistently as you're revving up towards going on tour or getting ready for indoor auditions or whatever you have coming up. So just a couple more things to put on top of everything else we've chatted about.
One last thing that I'll add to the already great like amount of information for you, Alex, is this is something that's like maybe a little more niche, and it was something that I really enjoyed thinking about. But April kind of talked about, you know, when we get into these more complicated poses, we start to like get tense or we stop breathing. So like breath is a huge thing, not just in yoga, but in running, in weightlifting, obviously. Just, you know, in all physical exercise, the breath is huge. But for me, it wasn't just breath. It was like, I almost considered it performing. Like when I'm running or when I'm, you know, lifting weights or cross training, if it's possible, like just remember how you look and make sure that, you know, if there's technique involved, obviously, you know, with like if I'm doing a deadlift, I have to make sure I follow certain techniques or I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to overextend my back, things like that. And just kind of like be aware, because that gives you like a performer confidence in just being aware of how your body moves and how you look while you move. And I found that for me, that transferred really well to just like, okay, I'm like deep in a show chunk that's really hard. We're trying to put it on the field with music and new drill. And you can just kind of like get out of your own way and let your body perform because you've thought so much about it in all of your training. Does that kind of make sense? Sweet.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Good luck to you, wherever you're heading.
Fabulous. We can wrap up unless anybody has anything else. I do group therapy for a job, so I can sit in silence waiting for people to talk all day, but I won't. So we can wrap up, and if folks, I don't know, if we can like formally end the recording, Vlad, and hang out and talk a little bit more. But
Yeah. Well, thank you, April, so much. This is awesome. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else did too. And we'll put this recording up on YouTube after this. We'll edit it down a little bit, add some stuff to it, and a lot more people will be able to learn from you. So thanks a lot to April for doing this. And thanks to everyone else for joining and learning today and adding your own wisdom to what April said as well. So if there's nothing else, we will end the recording. And then if we want to hang out and talk informally, not being recorded, we can do that too. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone. And I'm going to stop the recording right now.